Go ahead.
My name is Jerry Lynn Helmick.
And I'm Lorinda Helmick.
Where were you guys born?
I was born in Humboldt, Nebraska on August 19th, 1949.
And I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska on February 22nd, 1949.
Why were you given your first, middle, and names? If you know.
What my mom and dad tell me is about 2 days before I was born, my mom went to the grocery store, and there was this little kid in the grocery store, and he kept knocking everything off the shelves, and his mom kept saying, "Jerry Lynn, quit it." And my name was actually supposed to be Oscar when I was born. And instead she decided she'd name me Jerry Lynn.
And supposedly my name was supposed to be Arva, but then my mother liked the name Clorinda after Clorinda, Iowa, but changed it to Lorinda. So that's the history behind that one.
Can you tell me about your parents?
Oh, I don't know. I had two of them. My family was a very close-knit family. My mom and my dad, on both sides of their family, I had two sets of grandparents, and I had a lot of cousins and everything like that. That my parents were always pretty family-orientated. They, every Sunday we had dinner at my grandparents' house. And my mom always made sure I went to Sunday school, no matter how bad I was.
And my parents, my dad was a construction worker and my mother was a stay-at-home mom / she worked in restaurants once in a while. And they both came from very, very large families of brothers and sisters. And my parents are both from Nebraska also.
How many brothers and sisters do you have? And what memories do you have of them?
I don't have good memories of my brother, and I've only got one, and I don't count him.
I have a brother and I have a sister, and I think when we were little and growing up, we were all friends at that time because we didn't really have a lot of people around us. So, our memories was just like playing and running around on the farm and everything together.
What were you like as a child?
I was an excellent child. I was a wonder to behold. So, I don't know. I guess I was like every other kid that grew up on a farm. I mean, you just did whatever you did.
I think I was a good kid. I was always afraid of getting into trouble, so I always made sure that I did all my chores and did everything right because I certainly didn't want to get into trouble, and I didn't run around, so.
I'm opposite from that. I never worried about getting into trouble at all.
It's the yin to my yang, so there you go.
Did you get an allowance, and what kind of things did you buy with it?
I did not get an allowance, but every Saturday, my mom and her parents would go to a town 15 miles away. I didn't get an allowance, but I got 2 comic books every week. And they were 10 cents a piece.
I didn't get allowance. I worked after school babysitting, and with the money I got to go to Ben Franklin Dime Store, and I got to buy 45s, records, little records, and maybe some inexpensive lipstick if they had it there.
What kind of school did you go to, and what kind of student were you?
I went to, I went to grade school, high school, took some college. I don't know if you term me an average student. School was never really difficult for me. I was always be able to get good grades when I needed. The hardest thing about school for me is if I had to take a class that in my head would not benefit me in some way, you couldn't pound it into my head. And math is one of those things. I didn't like algebra and I didn't like geometry. And if you ask me anything about algebra or geometry today, I couldn't tell you anything. Okay? But I can figure out how much you owe me in my head.
And what was the question? He took too long.
What kind of school did you go to, and were you a good student?
I went to city school, Lincoln Northeast, and I was probably a B student, and I enjoyed all my classes and stuff there.
What was the best gift you remember receiving as a child?
I guess a bicycle. That would have been the best. I mean, I received a lot of good gifts. I got a BB gun. I got a .22 rifle. You know, they're all good gifts.
I got a doll that I keep downstairs, and she was my favorite doll, and so that's the gift I remember the most.
What did you want to be when you grow up?
Rich.
I wanted to be a nurse when I grew up. I wanted to be a Navy nurse, but I met Mr. You know who over here. And
Perfect. Mr. Perfect.
Mr. Perfect, and so that was not in my future.
What big world events do you remember from the time you were growing up?
I imagine the world events is going to be about the same for both of us. We grew up in the 50s when it was the Cold War, and they would take and do bomb drills with us and show us where the bomb shelters were and how long we could live underground. Then, you know, when we first started high school, the President Joe Kennedy was assassinated. I remember that day real clear. Everybody knows where they were, and it was just before Thanksgiving. And I mean, you know, the United States kind of came to a standstill. I mean, there were never, you know, in our lifetime or probably my parents' lifetime, there had never been someone killed at the head of this country.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's about it.
What's different about growing up today from when you were growing up?
I think today that the kids today have a lot more pressure on them than what we had. You know, I mean, you have studies that go into a lot of math, you have studies that go into a lot of science and things like that, where we didn't have that. You know, we did not have near the homework that you guys, that the students today have. We were allowed, where I grew up, the teachers always knew that once you left school, you had to go home, and it was a rural community, and you had chores to do, or you had to harvest and do stuff like that. The other thing of it is that I think is different today is that you have a lot of people growing up that think they are entitled to something without having to work for it. We were always taught if you wanted something, you had to work for it. And we've got too many people today that, and the government's allowing them to do that, to get something for nothing. They think they don't have to do anything. It's owed to them. And those people should be made to go to work.
I think kids today also live in a world of fear more than what we ever had to. We could go outside at any time and play and run up and down the block and do our thing and never have to worry about the things kids today have to worry about. Now all they have is go to school, come home, close the door, and get out electronic because they can't get out alone and just run their neighborhoods and stuff in safe conditions.
When you were a teenager, what did you do for fun? Like, where was your favorite hangout spot? And did you ever get into any trouble?
I might not answer that on grounds that might incriminate me. But like I said, I lived outside of a small town. When I was a teenager, I mean, you had to drive to a city, which was Falls City, which was 15 miles away. And, you know, kind of hung out there, went to the show. I went to the Redwood Inn because that was where you could pull up there and get all kinds of food. You know?
Mutton Jeffs.
Mutton Jeffs, don't forget Mutton Jeffs. That's the summertime though. So.
Well, with me, we mostly hung out with all our friends in Havelock, which is the area that I grew up in, Lincoln. And like I said, we could stay out and just, we went to Havelock Park. We would visit with each other, play a lot of kickball and that type of thing. I mean, it was just getting together and having some laughs and, you know, just getting it all out of our system, I guess.
When did you learn to drive, and who taught you?
I probably learned to drive when I was 9, 10 years old. I mean, we lived on a farm. I learned to drive a tractor. I learned to drive a pickup truck. And I mean, it was just a natural thing. I mean, it wasn't like driving on the highway. We drove on the farm.
I don't think I got to drive till I was about 16, and my brother come home off his paper route. He'd spent money on this old beat-up car, and he brought it home, and that's where I learned to drive, and got my license when I was like 17, I think.
How did you decide what you wanted to do with your life, and how do you feel about that choice?
I don't know. When I was growing up, there was a lot of emphasis today, and I put a lot of emphasis on education, of going to college and furthering your education and making something of yourself. Where I grew up, there was not the talk of going to college. You know, if you went to college, you would have to go to, there was a teacher's college not too far away, or there was a junior college in Kansas and a teacher's college in Peru. You would go to either one of those, and the one in Kansas really didn't prepare you for nothing, and the other one at Peru was a teacher's college. You know, and not everybody wants to be a teacher. I certainly did not. So I went to Barber College in Lincoln, Nebraska. And after I got out of Barber College, I found out that, you know, once again, it's back to you got to work to eat, okay? You couldn't make a living cutting hair, so I became a meat cutter. And from a meat cutter, I worked for the union. I was a negotiator.
What was the question?
What did you decide to do with your life, and how do you feel about that choice?
Well, my first choice was to be, you know, going into the Navy, becoming a nurse, and that type of thing. Like Jerry said, we didn't have like counselors and school people that would say, hey, what do you want with your future? Here's your, you know, lay it out in front of us. This is what you'd be good at, and test us out and everything like that. It was just once you were out of high school, you were floundering. Unless you were rich, you couldn't go to college. And so it took over the nursing type of thing rather than, you know, teaching. There really wasn't, back in the 60s, a whole lot a woman did. It was either teach or be a nurse or be a secretary. And that was pretty much it.
What was your first job, and what did you like or not like about it?
My first job was, like I said, I grew up on a farm, and I would hire myself out to make hay. What that entailed was, you know, they would bale hay, and we would have to pick it up, put it on racks, and put it in the barn. And it was all right. It was outdoor work. You know, if it rained, you go to town. You know, and for a kid back then, you know, I probably made $2.50 an hour. Except that I learned that if you racked it right out of the hay baler, you made an extra $1 an hour. So I became a racker. So I made about $3.50 to $3.75 an hour. Yeah, I liked it all. It was fine. It just wasn't steady work. But I mean, you know, you worked probably 2-3 days a week.
I worked, after I got out of high school, I worked at Lincoln General Hospital, and I worked on the orthopedic ward and took classes in licensed practical nursing, and I really loved it. I loved working there, so.
How did you meet your spouse, and what did you like about him or her?
She tried to run me over.
I was driving around what was known as a place that everybody eats, King's Restaurant up in Lincoln on Bow Street, and he was standing out in the middle of the road hollering, stop or hit me, and I stopped, and that was our first meeting.
Now you wonder why I did that, don't you?
And I didn't like him right that night because he had a big mouth on him.
There was other people, and that's where you went to meet people. And these other guys said that her and her girlfriend never talked to anybody or nothing else. So I bet them $5 that I could get him to stop. Not only did I get him to stop, I got in the car with them whether they wanted me to or not.
How and when did you get engaged?